Welcome back to the Chicagolandians, a casual Chicago sports podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Cunningham, joined by my co-host, Conor Cunningham.
We're two brothers from the Chicagoland area talking about the latest and greatest in Chicago sports news.
Welcome back to another episode of the Chicagolandians. In this episode, we're going to be discussing a quick NFL news update, followed by a discussion of the Bears stadium renovation plans, and then finally going over a general overview of the NFL draft for 2024, and discussing in more depth the different options the Bears have and an overall perspective of the draft strengths and weaknesses. Today, very excited to say that we are joined by one of our great cousins, Kevin Donahue. Kevin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. Patrick was correct. I am cousins with these gentlemen on my mother's side, and have known them their whole life. And only recently discovered that we have a mutual love for all things Bears. So it's great to be here, and can't wait to dig into it.
Okay, excited to have you.
One of the great surprises in the last couple of weeks was, I think, Mike, our brother, texting us. I think or maybe it was John, your mock draft, and like huge like wormhole of red strings. Like, whoa, this guy's a
very Pepe Silvio, Charlie from It's Always Funny.
It really got into sort of Charlie in the mailroom kind of vibes, or like A Beautiful Mind, just nothing but like press clippings and photographs on the wall. So,
yeah. I think John used the term Kevin is very in the weeds with mock drafts right now, and then sent that over. It was very, very interesting to look over.
Yeah, it got really pathetic at one point. I was starting to save screenshots of mock drafts that I was really proud of, and then I got a notification from Google saying, "Do you want to pay $1 a month to increase to this amount of storage space?" And I'm like, all right, I need to stop this.
Yeah. Okay. So just to start, one of the breaking news stories that I think happened yesterday, I believe, over the in the last couple of days, was Stefon Diggs was just traded to the Houston Texans. The Buffalo Bills gave up Stefon Diggs and in exchange receive a second-round pick. The Texans, in addition to Stefon Diggs, also get 2024 sixth-round pick and a 2025 fifth-round pick. This paired with adding Joe Mixon really feels like Texans are gearing up to kind of have a win-now mentality. Like Mixon and Diggs are both very old, not very old, but in their prime or near the end of their prime in their careers. And with such a young quarterback like Stroud, it really feels like it's very interesting to see how quickly they've made the transition to, trying to make a serious playoff push now.
No, I mean, it's the Texans are going to be dangerous this year.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw what they did last season with CJ Stroud. Probably the most impressive rookie quarterback performance ever, I think. And they made it to the playoffs with what they had. But yeah, when you look at their offense, you got Stroud, Mixon, Stefon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and then Dalton Schultz. I mean, I think that might equate to at least like a top 7 offense right there.
I agree.
And then you got Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter on the other side of the ball. So yeah, it's they're going to be scary this year.
Nick Caserio has really been cooking this year, especially going out and acquiring like studs on both ends of the ball, especially as a Bears fan being very upset to see Danielle Hunter go to the Texans. Like, seems like they're really moving in the right spot. I will say, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, Pat, but looking at Diggs' stats here, it is interesting to kind of think of Diggs as a player. It seems like he kind of followed 2 similar paths on his way out from Minnesota and his way out from Buffalo. Both, he's kind of he's an emotional player. He kind of wears his emotions on his sleeve. And he recently had those tweets talking about Josh Allen and like Josh Allen's performance being tied to having an elite receiver. Funny enough, he was traded soon after that. But yeah, it's interesting to see the production that he had last year, especially with the introduction of Joe Brady to the offense. I think he went down to like a 45 yard per game receiver after Joe Brady came in, even though their offense like really started to take off. But it seemed like kind of with the conflict he was creating within the team and also the productivity he was having with Joe Brady, Bills decided that he wasn't part of the long-term future, which is shocking now looking at the receiving core they have. I think highlighted by like Khalil Shakir and like Curtis Samuel as their wide receiver ones and twos.
They got rid of Gabe Davis. Yeah,
yeah, don't have Gabe Davis. Yeah, he's in Jacksonville now, so they don't have a lot going on there. I guess they got Dalton Kincaid. But yeah, definitely interesting. Second round pick, I think, is interesting considering he's going to turn 31 this year. Especially comparing him to the fourth round pick we had for Keenan Allen. Might be biased for a Bears fan, but definitely will be interesting to see how Diggs does, especially entering his third team. And the last thing I'll say is I think he is due next year. I think he'll be due $0 guaranteed money on his contract, which is interesting to see that like the Bills are going to eat so much dead cap space this year for trading him. But then, kind of just using that to think about the problems he was going to create on this team versus eating that dead cap, kind of like what the locker room really thought of Diggs. I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, really seems like they just kind of needed a fresh start. I guess you've had what maybe like the last 3, maybe 4 years. It seems like, studs in the regular season and then playoffs always come up short. Yeah, it kind of makes you nervous though with such a stud quarterback like Josh Allen. It seems like resetting the clock and resetting the offense makes you I don't know. As a Bills fan, I get nervous. But, real quick, just to highlight specifically, as a Bears fan, love to highlight Keenan Allen versus Stephon Diggs. So in 2023, keep in mind Keenan Allen is 2 years older than Stephon Diggs, but Keenan Allen had 108 catches, 1,200 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then Diggs had only 107 receptions with 1,200 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. It's very comparable stats, but Diggs played 4 more games than Keenan Allen. So when you think of the production, Keenan Allen last year had a rocket of a start before getting an injury. I don't know. Makes you excited for a fourth round pick versus second round pick. Really makes you feel confident in what Poles is doing and finding value.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I saw that come across my my Instagram yesterday.
Come across your desk, yeah.
It came across my desk. Yeah, the ticker that I keep next to my desk. But I just all I could think about were kind of what I already conveyed about how the Texans are really just making a push, going all in, trying to finally be an impactful player, impactful franchise, and just what are the Bills left with? I mean, Josh Allen. Yeah, the guy is Swiss Army knife, and he can kind of do everything. But you wonder like how much more it's going to be on his shoulders now. I mean, at least he has Stephon Diggs as a target. Even with that, and when they did have offensive weapons, he would run like full bore. I feel like he was just willing to sacrifice his body, even with all those weapons. And you wonder like how much of like that luck of him not getting like seriously hurt is going to happen when he's probably going to be expected to do that now more, now that they're kind of trying to start from scratch. Where are the Bills placed now in the draft? What number do they have?
I believe the 27th, but I could check that real quick.
Okay. I think it's 27th
28th. 28th, yeah.
Yeah. So do you guys think they're going to trade up? Because I was listening to a podcast the other day. They were speculating that they might reach out to the Bears to see if they can grab a Dunze. And if they did that, that would be, I mean, that kind of a move. I mean, that's 19 moves or something. That would be huge draft capital that we could get in return for that. I mean, we're going to get the 28th, but then you get their 60th pick. So we'll have a second round there. It's a little bit, high the second round. But yeah, I mean, I think after that, we would probably maybe get a first round next year. So then that would give us 2 first rounds and 2 second rounds next year. I don't know. We'll get into the draft, later in the show. But yeah, I mean, I think that and how many good free agents are out there that could even come close to matching what Diggs gave them? So I think they're going to have to rely on getting something to draft. Now, there are going to be plenty of options at wide receiver in this draft.
For sure.
Yeah, just food for thought.
It's funny to think of the Bills having a high draft pick. Like a team that you'd never expect to have, trade off for a top 10 pick or never need to draft that high. That'd be kind of a turning of the tables.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Minnesota. Yeah, I mean, they when did they make that trade down to like 22? That was like a month ago, maybe?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the speculation is that they're going to use that and their 11th pick.
Trade up to the 5.
Get up to the 5. Yeah.
Get either like the Chargers or the Giants to let them get
McCarthy. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to get a hold of myself. I'll have plenty of time to make fun of JJ McCarthy. But there's a lot of big moves already being made this early. So
certainly interesting.
Yeah. So I think that was the main update since our last episode of the big free agency moves. Connor, do you remember any other significant signings or significant trades that went on?
In terms of action around the league, no, I feel like that was the main thing that was going on. The other big thing was that Williams actually had a visit with Hollis Hall, getting in the building and continuing to do installs and stuff. So I feel like that was the top 30 visit was something that was taking a bit to happen, but kind of that happened now. I guess now that Fields has moved, it's not really something that we were not expecting, right? I feel like the drama around the number 1 pick has kind of been alleviated since Field was picked or traded, but Caleb got in the building, which is good to see. Had dinner. I assume Poles paid for it, but yeah, I guess that was the other thing.
Yeah. Poles really running up a tab, taking Caleb Williams.
I know, yeah.
I heard the place went at USC's Pro Day. It was a rather expensive restaurant. I don't know where he took him this time, but I imagine probably right up there as far as priciness. So didn't Odunze also have his 30-day visit, or did I hear it just got scheduled?
I think that was it. Yeah. I wonder if these dinners, like, if there's any evaluation going on there, like anything to speculate on what Williams orders, where his eyes kind of go on the menu, kind of what you think of that.
Where the placement of the forks.
Yeah. Yeah, how he runs an offense, kind of how he runs a dinner plate. You think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Does he separate the peas and the steak? Is he methodical there? How does he talk to the waitress? Typical stuff you look out for on a first or second.
That's real draft day stuff. That's no one came to his birthday party.
That's Kevin Costner stuff. You'd see him.
Yeah.
Right before Poles divides his scouts into 3 groups to decide what to do at number 9. Before that, they dedicated at least 2 hours to talking about all the mannerisms he had at the table.
Yeah.
Oh, what a movie. I feel like it's always also, now it's a weird power dynamic with having NIL players where Caleb Williams has made millions and millions of dollars in college, where it's like, he probably has similar amounts of money to maybe not Poles, but maybe Eberflus or the coaching staff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, not knowing how much the average GM makes. I got to think if it's a big market and you have such an atrocious record of hiring GMs like the Bears do. I got to think that he's pulling down. I mean, I got to think at least 7 figures, but
yeah. I'm on overthecap.com, which is usually where you find Poles, but this is Ryan Poles, the left guard. His draft hit for, in 2008, he signed for 3 years, $1 million. Don't know how that translates to his kind of current contract.
I don't know if he used that for negotiating nowadays, but
yeah. I know Poles had an interview on McAfee where he talked about Williams and being an NIL guy. Because I feel like Williams and maybe like Stroud and Bryce Young were like kind of NIL players, but like I feel like Williams is the main guy making like $7 million or something. But like he was saying something about like, now these players have this money already, kind of like the difference between like getting a contract, not knowing what to do with that money, or like, being a little bit more used to it. I don't know if there's any value to it, but it's interesting that Poles kind of like commented on that about Williams being such a prominent NIL player.
Yeah. Well, I saw that interview as well. And Poles, and maybe it's just spin, but he definitely looked at it in a positive light where, and I mean, not only does this guy, he's used to getting so much attention. Since he was at Oklahoma, winning the Heisman, and then getting all these endorsements and NIL money, doing commercials. It's kind of like he's had the rookie quarterback experience already.
Yeah.
That might be kind of overwhelming for some, rookie quarterbacks in earlier years before NIL, where, the attention and the media might be too much for him, but it looks like he does look like a natural in handling media.
He really does.
It looks like the guy's gotten at least a first year's worth of PR counseling.
Yeah,
Whenever he answers questions, not batting away BS comments about the pink nails or the pink phone or
are you afraid to compete? Yeah.
Yeah, I just no, and I agree with Bowles in that sense.
Yeah, he's got confidence. He's got swag. It's nice to see.
For sure.
Less of a
LA does that too.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on now to next segment of this, where we're going to talk about the Bears' potential future stadium expansions. I think in the last podcast I mentioned things are looking up for the Bears because of just the option to rebuild or move away from Soldier Field, which after, last couple of days of doing research, I found out is, one of the worst stadiums in the NFL, one of the smallest, doesn't have a dome.
The smallest.
Yeah, it is the smallest. Okay, yeah. In a terrible climate, doesn't have a dome, terrible parking situation, not a lot going on, very hard to get to, a lot of things bad. So the idea of the Bears getting a new option, getting a new start with a new stadium is very exciting. There are two options right now. Prior to, I think, last couple weeks, the main option was Bears moving to Arlington Heights. We recently acquired in 2022, I believe, we bought the Arlington Racetrack, which is a 326-acre old racetrack that we then started demolishing. And the plan was to create this huge, expansive, not just stadium, but entire entertainment environment, similar to, I would say, like Wrigley Field for the Cubs. But in the recent weeks, we have new news from who's the guy making the calls here right now? It's
Kevin Warren.
Kevin Warren. Yeah. Okay.
Kevin Warren. Yeah.
So Kevin Warren has come out and said that he has plans to keep the Bears in Chicago and actually plans to invest $2 billion to a new stadium that ironically is almost the same location as Soldier Field. I think they said the construction would be in the south parking lot of Soldier Field. It's like right next to it. So that's led us today to have, two different opinions, two different choices, and we're kind of going to get into advantages and disadvantages of both sides. So Kevin, I'll toss this up to you right now to kind of get us started.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this as ultimately a negotiating tactic by Kevin Warren. So, I mean, the big, I guess the catalyst for the change in at least public attitudes that Kevin Warren has taken has been around the tax assessment that Arlington Heights came up with. And keep in mind that they spent almost $200 million on the racetrack, and Arlington Heights valued the taxable. Basically, they put $160 million value on it, even though they're tearing down anything that you could make money off of. So, and I think what that came out to is I want to say it was a $9 million a year tax bill that would. I don't know what the timeline is for when they would complete that giant, the stadium and the surrounding area, but some estimates were like 7 years or something. And so they'd be paying $9 million for 7 years. And so from that perspective, I get that, okay, there's nothing of value that's bringing any money that can help offset that. And we're just like paying the lease on Soldier Field, which I think is at $6 million. And then they're paying another $9 million. I think that Arlington Heights kind of overplayed their hand there. But I mean, this is what happens in negotiations. Kevin Warren, I think, was frustrated. He went to Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, and said, "Hey, I'm not going to build a new stadium. The Bears' priority is still Arlington Heights. But I know that you have had a horrible run out to the first year of being mayor. How about we tell the public that will appeal to hardcore Bear fans that live in the south and southwest suburbs where it's easy for them to get to Soldier Field, from 55, and let's say, hey, we still want to have it on the lake. We're willing to give $2 billion, and let's just say it's a public stadium. Maybe that, and this way I'll have a negotiating token against Arlington Heights, and you can say that you did more than Lori Lightfoot to try to keep fares here. We'll let it like play out for a couple months, and then once Arlington Heights gives in, which it seems like they already have, given a counter that seems much more reasonable than what they first came. You know, once that's happened, we'll say, well, you know what, we were getting too much pushback from Friends of the Park. This will be Brandon Johnson's take. We're getting too much pushback from Friends of the Park. The city councilmen, you know, they keep complaining that we can't, you know, help out in any way and everything like that. That is what I am 99% sure is going on. And I can go through the reasons, and I've got 10 categories as to why this makes no sense, like a pros cons list, and only one of them I gave a pro to Chicago. But I'll pause and let you guys respond.
Well, so you would say, and then end goal, in 5 years, the Bears are playing in Chicago or Arlington Heights then?
No, they are going to be in Arlington Heights.
Arlington Heights. Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, I guess I didn't follow too well kind of what happened with like US Bank Stadium with Minnesota, but I know Warren, like that was his calling card for helping with the Vikings. I know he put a projection on like 3 years to touchdown for actually building the stadium. It took 2.5, or it took a little under 3 years to build US Bank Stadium, so it's pretty quick. But yeah, certainly interesting, especially now it seems odd that the racetrack is demolished. And now it seems like stuff has stalled with talks, but you know, I guess if that's just how it goes.
And you got to kind of put it in. So I did a little bit of research on what happened with US Bank, and I'm sure you guys might have been old enough to remember that the situation in Minnesota was abysmal. I mean, the old stadium that Minnesota was using literally collapsed.
This was the snow, right? The snow caused the stadium.
The roof was like only marginally more structurally sound than like a camp tent. I mean, I think it was actually like not inflatable, obviously, but it was like a sort of hardened plastic with light framing around it. I mean, it literally looks like they just jury-rigged a dome on top of what was an open-air stadium. And then there was a giant snowfall, and like there's a video of like just this, you know, this avalanche of snow just falling into, I think it was like at the 50-yard line. And so that was kind of the nail in the coffin. Been like, okay, we need a new stadium. We have this area that is like at the intersection of all the main arteries in the city. It's actually like a really convenient spot where they put US Bank. And I don't know what the ratio was as far as Vikings money to public money, but in that scenario, like Minneapolis is a much more financially sound city than Chicago. And I don't know what they did with the Twins' new stadium, but I want to say that a lot of that came from ownership as far as funding that new stadium. So with this, I got to think that it's kind of like Wisconsin and the Packers. Like the whole state is in love with the Vikings. And then like number two is probably Minnesota Gophers hockey. So yeah, I mean, I think that there was more of a public support around giving public funding there, but here it's I just have no confidence that it's going to fly. Like trying to get public money from Chicago. So if you want, I can break into like some of the main reasons that I don't think that this is.
Oh yeah, just real quick, one question. So I think the one thing I was confused about was, I guess you think of like SoFi Stadium, I think cost $5 billion to make or something, I think. So I guess I was confused, but that was split amongst obviously two teams paying for it.
Was it though? I thought it was Gronke that paid for all of it.
Oh.
I might be wrong.
Okay, I just assumed it was Chargers, Rams. Maybe I guess I don't know how that works.
Because I mean, I'm not positive either. I thought it was all Gronke paying for it, or at least his sort of consortium, like, you know, investment group. Because I think he owns the Nuggets.
Oh, okay.
I think he owns the Avalanche. I mean, I think and he also has like a huge investment group. So it's not like it's the only asset he owns, whereas the McCaskies is basically the only asset they own. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that they were building the stadium and then the Chargers just got fed up with San Diego.
Gotcha.
So they are, I think, leasing from Kroenke. But there could have been a shared thing because I think it was probably maybe half a year after they broke ground that the Chargers made the decision to move to LA.
Per quick Google search, privately funded by Stan Kroenke at $5 billion.
That's a lot of cheddar. Jeez.
Yeah.
Holy
That's insane.
Wow. Yeah, which is the same number, by the way, that I think the Bears put out there for Arlington Heights. And it's kind of a similar type of development, I think. I think that with SoFi, you've got the stadium, but if you look around, you can see that they're trying to build an entertainment district there as well.
Yeah. But with $2 billion, I feel like there's a huge chunk of change to contribute. So then I was confused why we still market it as a public facility, which I feel like is the main. Maybe I'm just confused on the terminology here, but I thought the main problem with Soldier Field is that it's a public thing and it's not privately owned by the Bears. So I figured, why are we contributing $2 billion to still have it be not in our control? I guess I'm confused by that.
And so that gets to my first point,
Perfect.
which is the cost. Okay, that $2 billion number, that is a bullshit number. They know it is. It's going to be higher than that. There are multiple sources that say that the infrastructure alone outside of that stadium to try to accommodate what Friends of the Park would be willing to hear. As far as not, because when they put that $2 billion number out, it was it's also going to be a public stadium and it'll increase green space by 20%. There weren't a lot of details at all. There still aren't a lot of details on how, with Soldier Field right there, basically that parking lot, the Waldron parking lot there, they're going to have to contort themselves all kinds of ways. On the surface, it looks like, all right, you're taking away from green space. How are you increasing green space? And so there's been a couple leaks that have come out that, even though they haven't publicly made a master plan, that, you would take down the stadium portion, you basically take down the spaceship that's currently inside of the colonnades and make that green space, I guess. And then you would build a multi-layer underground parking lot under Soldier Field.
That does not sound cheap.
I mean, no. I mean, and then also you're backed up to Lakeshore Drive. And then also, so here's a stat that I looked up the other day. So you mentioned the Arlington Heights is 326 acres. And then SoFi property is just under that. I think it's 290 and some change. How big do you think just the stadium is of SoFi, US Bank, Jerry World, and Allegiant Stadium? How big do you think that is?
All of that combined?
Just the stadiums.
All of that combined?
No. Just what the average? I mean, they're all kind of in the same range.
Oh,
I can tell you, but yeah.
I mean, I'm sure. I feel like SoFi is the biggest.
It is. It's 25 acres. The smallest is US Bank at 20 acres.
Okay. And
Soldier Field is 15 acres, which makes sense because, as you mentioned, it's the smallest, NFL stadium in the country. So, how big do you think the Waldron lot is?
I don't know, actually. 25.
The Waldron lot is 8 acres.
Holy smokes!
Wow. Yikes!
Jeez.
In 8 acres, you can fit Wrigley Field and Fenway Park, the two smallest baseball fields in MLB. But I looked at it, and if they wanted to expand outside of the Waldron lot, so basically at the north side of this site, you take the very south end of Soldier Field, and then to the south, you've got the McCormick Place parking lot, and then you are riding the edge of Lakeshore Drive to the west, and then basically touching the lake to the east. That will give you 21 acres. So that is the only scenario where they could fit a venue that is going to be able to get you, that is going to be a top tier NFL caliber stadium that will also attract Goodell with a Super Bowl, the NCAA with March Madness, with all the, concerts that today's top acts expect, like whatever, Taylor Swift can do a summer concert in Soldier Field, but it's just like they would much prefer not having the elements and trying to play the piano in pouring rain. So, so yeah, I mean, I think, and if you're doing that, then you're going to be, so 21 minus A, you're taking 13 acres of public space away. And you're still trying to tell the city and Friends of the Park that you're increasing 20% green space with this development. So,
yeah. And Friends of the Park, I was unfamiliar with Friends of the Park until looking into this, but they famously, I don't know if I was around at this time, but they sued George Lucas for trying to put a museum, I assume a Star Wars museum, on in a similar location. So I'd imagine with this grand plan of ideally expanding beyond just the stadium and creating the surrounding area, that would just create just headache on headache on headache, just so many problems with so many people trying to expand so much that just seems like not worth the juice, is not worth that squeeze.
And also keep in mind that like the city of Chicago is still paying $620 million from the 2002 renovation. Okay. Of Soldier Field. Okay. Now, granted, a lot of that is just because of all the dumb decisions that the city of Chicago has made. But also, there's not going to be any public support for giving public money at all. I mean, you have that point of the, they want to leave Soldier Field and city's still paying it off by a huge amount. But look what has happened in Kansas City, by the way. Yeah. Kansas City had a very similar situation with what is happening now in Chicago, where the Royals and the Chiefs requested basically maybe $1.3 billion in public assistance for a brand new baseball stadium for the Royals. And I think like $400 million in public assistance for upgrading Arrowhead. And Kansas City and the state of Missouri are in very, very good financial shape. Comparable, like the state of Illinois is the worst. They're number 50 in basically fiscal profile. And Chicago is second worst in the country behind New York. With all that being said, and with the Chiefs having given them 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, they still voted it down.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So look at that scenario.
Yeah.
What do you think the Bears are going to get if they try to get public, opinions on this?
Yeah.
And the Bears can throw out that survey, which if you look into it, their public statement about that, that's like 60.
I was going to bring that up. 66% want.
Go ahead. I thought that was ridiculous.
I was just going to say, I think 66% of Chicagoans said they prefer to keep the Bears in, the Bears in Chicago rather than going to the suburbs. I guess is that a bogus survey?
Yeah. No. What I saw is that they're in favor of giving public money.
Oh,
that was what they highlighted.
Oh, okay.
And if you look at the question that was asked, it was actually, do you support public money to go into transportation infrastructure to help go to a Bears stadium? That was the question. And then the Bears took that and said, you know what, we're just going to say that they support public money for the stadium. And it's also done by a pollster company that no one really has heard of. It doesn't even have a rating on 538. I mean, it's they just paid some maybe guy in a cubicle. Like, here, you come up with this and you're a third party that we can reference.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think the real numbers are probably going to be much more abysmal than whatever they cooked up there.
Audio listeners, Kevin in the background, he's got kind of this Kevin BS meter. It's like falling off the wall right now. He's smelling all this BS everywhere.
It's smoking.
Sorry, I'll try to put a rosy glow on it at some point. Sorry.
Well, so I think it's similar in the fact that the Sox are also considering a move, a stadium shift as well. I think we hadn't fully considered a Gavin Sheets kind of breakout season, the Sox starting off at like 1-4, I think maybe we could turn into like a franchise, really get a couple World Series in there, the franchise starts getting a little better there, but I agree. I think there's a lot to figure out.
Definitely. I do, but I mean, for what it's worth, I mean, at least the Sox had the decency to at least come out with like drawings.
Some renderings,
renderings of what it would look like. And also like, on that strip of land by the river, I think it's called like the 78 or something like that. That would be, I mean, whatever. I am the second worst ownership, sports owner is the Bears. The worst one is Jerry Reinsdorf.
Jerry Reinsdorf, baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
I absolutely, don't think that guy should get a dime, but at least he, put out renderings and was smart about like, actually, this is only like a 15-minute walk from like Union Station, maybe like a 20-minute walk from Ogilvy. There's actually going to be some decent parking there. It's easy to access, and it looks amazing.
Did look
like what they
incredible.
put together. So I mean, just comparing that to the Bears' proposition of giving nothing except like a 3-sentence press release. I mean, I think the Sox proposition looks definitely more appealing.
I think we could hit maybe a couple more points for the Bears Stadium, the pros and cons. So we hit the cost. That's the main thing that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin, do you have? I feel like just real quick with the survey. I think what I saw with fans supporting. I feel like there's the argument of like, oh, you want to keep the Bears in Chicago. What are the Bears if they're in the suburbs? I feel like people forget that 10 NFL teams actually don't play anywhere near their home city, and the Dallas Cowboys, which is literally the most popular NFL team, they play 20 miles away from Dallas. And actually, since building their stadium in 2009, it only increased the amount of interest in the Cowboys. Sure. So I think it's maybe hard to look at first, but when you look at it in a broader context and see other examples, you see like it wouldn't be, it's not the end of the world.
I do not understand why people are so upset about that thing. I gotta think it's actually manufactured. And like I said, I think you only are hearing that, I think, from the people that maybe live on the south side of the city or the south or southwest suburbs where it's easier to get to. If you guys have tried to get to Soldier Field, like when you out in the western burbs, like you, I grew up in the western burbs. It was never even a thought on my dad's mind to try to take 88 to 290, try to find parking in that, like comparably to other NFL teams, very small parking lot. I mean, granted, you do have the Roosevelt stop that is a 25-minute walk from the stadium that connects to the red line and the green line. And you do have 55 right there. But when you compare that to Arlington Heights, I mean, there would be plenty of parking, plenty of room for tailgating, which you're not tailgating on an underground bunker of a
nightmare.
parking deck. I don't even think legally. I mean, I just think that the liability of that, having a bunch of drunk
propane
people
tanks down there,
I mean, dimly. I mean, whatever. It would be a great fan experience. You would have tons of shops, bars, restaurants. There are 4 bars within a 20-minute walk. You got it basically where the Roosevelt stop is. You're walking that same distance to actually get. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple bars that are actually at Soldier Field, but you're walking like 20 to 25 minutes from the 4 bars that are in the South Loop that are reasonable to walk to or from Soldier Field. Arlington Heights is connected. I wrote this down. Hold on. Arlington Heights is connected by 90, 290, Route 53, Palatine/Willow Road, which is basically like this very busy street that accommodates like where I live in the North Shore area. It has its own metro stop, which is something that none of these world-class stadiums have. So you get on at Ogilvy in Chicago, and based on the schedule right now on Sundays, it's a 15-minute train ride where you're allowed to drink, by the way.
Wow.
And I got to imagine if they did go through with it, there would be more trains. And granted, you're going to have to work with Metra and pay some money for that accommodation. But if it's an express train, it's 25 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, you take that in consideration and how easy it would be for people living in the city who don't want to, drive to Arlington Heights. But even in the South, I mean, it wouldn't be more than like maybe a 50-minute drive on Sunday. But yeah, I mean, from a transportation perspective, from a parking and tailgate perspective, from a fan experience perspective, I just think that it all, beyond what we already discussed, it is just lights out the right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last point tied in. I think Kevin, when I looked at your pros and cons list, the one that stood out to me was convenience for Bears staff or Bears players?
That was a throwaway.
Okay.
I was really reaching with that one. Because ultimately that's not a deciding factor at all. Hallis Hall to Soldier Field, on a game day at home, it would probably take like 50 minutes to an hour, according to Google Maps.
Mm-hmm.
Going from Hallis Hall to Arlington Heights Racetrack would be, what was it? It was like a 30 to 35-minute drive.
Wow.
Hey.
So, that's not going to put anything over the edge.
Like Kevin Warren, listen up. Yeah.
Yeah, when they're all carpooling together.
I was just stacking the deck when I put that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, sweet. I feel like those are great overview of the two different options. Do you guys feel comfortable moving on?
Yeah, Kevin, I just want to say thank you for all the prep work you did there. I feel like tax implications, some of these city politics, budgeting kind of falls, not necessarily in my Q zone where I'm at right now in my life, but I'm glad you were able to provide some of that backbone. Thank you for the research that you did. This is very helpful.
You're very, very welcome. And like I said when I was texting you guys the other day, it's like when you have two little kids running around and you got a busy job during the weekday, you need something to take yourself off your mind. And I'm not going to succumb to pickleball like my friends have.
Yeah.
So I've chosen to go all in on just Bears everything. So.
No, that was funny. You mentioned kind of seeing some like leaked stuff about the stadium. So you kind of like crawling, a little more risky parts of the internet, kind of searching for stadium updates. That's I really like the work that you kind of getting the like dark web kind of thing, seeing like, turning over some stones to find some Bears news. I like it.
Hey, no, happy to contribute, man.
So the next segment that we want to talk about is a general draft overview. Actually, was it our first episode, Connor? What was it? First or second episode where we went over the draft, where we talked about specifically the number 1 and the number 9 pick, really focused on the Bears. Now we wanted to take more of a holistic view and look at the draft on a larger perspective and just take a step back from the 9th pick and look maybe at the 3rd pick that we have, the 75 pick, kind of talk a little slower, a little holistically on the draft. So Connor, I'm gonna pass it to you, Connor. For starting with the draft.
Yeah, for sure. So I think last time that we talked about the draft, it was still at the point where we had Justin Fields rostered. So, I guess there was still a little thought about what would happen with the number 1 pick, but I feel like that now at this point has been all but solved. So I think now, we could pencil in Caleb Williams at the 1. I think the main thing that, at least for now we can, I think it's to the point, and I guess we could open this up. I think it's to the point where that draft pick is not movable unless Poles is crafting one of the greatest smoke screens possibly ever seen. But I think it's safe to say that pick is locked in. Obviously.
Didn't he come out a couple days ago? Like, I don't know what podcast he was on, but it was pretty candid. Like, because I think he had just was on the tail end of like probably doing 20 podcasts or interviews in a row. And he was asked point blank, "Are you taking a quarterback?" And he was like, "Yeah."
Obviously.
Do I have to say this? Yeah, of course we're taking a quarterback.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think he's doing a great job. And so he also knows what to say and what not to say. So obviously he's not going to say Caleb Williams, but at that point he's looking at the public and being like, why are you guys even speculating?
Yeah.
Of course, we just got rid of, he didn't say this, but it's like, we just got rid of Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Like, you think like we're not going to draft a quarterback? So
I know.
I thought that was kind of fun.
Him on McAfee, I think all the producers or all the people on that show were pretty much like, hey, congrats, you're taking Caleb Williams with the number 1 pick.
After he deflected, he's like, all right, congratulations. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think at this point, unless something happens, I think we don't need to necessarily talk about the number 1 pick. I think we can, leave that. I think a more interesting topic would be kind of like the 9th, the topic of like moving up or down in the draft, maybe talking about the 75th pick. But I think as a whole, it would be most interesting to kind of talk about the 9th pick, positional strengths, kind of like where we think this draft is strong and weak at, how to best use that pick. I think it kind of starts with the receiving core as a whole. So I think like at the 9, I think, our big goal would be, or at least in my eyes, the ideal world would be to grab one of the big 3 receivers, that being Marvin Harrison, Odunze, or Malik Neighbors. I think, obviously, or at least the way that draft is shaken out right now, it seems like Harrison is not going to be there, besides, say, for some, random PFF mocks you see where Marvin Harrison falls to the 9. I think getting one of those two, either between Odunze or Neighbors, would be the ideal scenario. I think a lot of this is going to come down to kind of where McCarthy ends up falling within the top 10. If he does end up becoming a quarterback who's taken within the 5, especially by the Chargers trading, that pick away, I think that'd really open the door for the Bears to be able to grab a receiver, especially with the Chargers in such of a need for a receiver. If the Vikings were able to move up and kind of take them out of there, I think Odunze or Neighbors really becomes a strong option. And I think even though we've acquired Keenan Allen, I think drafting one of those receivers is really I think there's such a tier break between Odunze, Neighbors, and then maybe AD Mitchell or Xavier Worthy or whatever, Keon Coleman. I feel like the drop there is incredible. I was just looking here, Darren Jeremiah and I think Mel Kiper all have Odunze as consensus 3 or 4 player, with Neighbors and Odunze kind of trading off between that 3 or 4. So I feel like if we're able to grab one of those players, I think regardless, having an excess of solid receivers is never a bad idea. But yeah, I would kind of open the floor to kind of what you guys think you would like to see at the 9, thinking about at what point you'd be interested in trading back in the draft or trading up in the draft, something that we have not really seen polls do before, and then kind of some other prospects that you're looking at. I know last year, kind of the draft of Darnell Wright, I know at least from a media perspective, that was something that came on pretty late in terms of draft season. I feel like that was something that I wasn't super tapped in on. I obviously the Bears knew who they were going to take well before the draft, but if there's any players that you'd like to highlight that you feel like aren't getting a lot of buzz yet, but yeah, kind of open the floor up to some discussions about the 9. What do you think you would like to see?
So I would say I feel like for getting a receiver, I feel like the only scenario we get a receiver is if someone trades up and gets McCarthy. I think the top 3 guys are not going to be available unless mainly the Vikings. I'm not sure who else would trade up, try to make that move. Maybe the Broncos. I don't know if they have enough capital after Russ.
I agree with you on the Vikings.
Yeah.
I think the Vikings are going to try to definitely take either Chargers or maybe Giants.
Yeah.
To try to grab that.
That's sweet JJ McCarthy. Yeah.
So sweet. And he just those golden locks of hair that he's got. He just great in purple, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that I definitely think they're going to trade up, and then I would love to see either the the Saints or the Raiders or maybe even the Colts might trade up, but sorry, I'll pause. Sorry, Patrick, you were saying.
So I would say the most exciting scenario for me and what I would like to happen the most is us getting a receiver. I think with Keenan Allen, I know we talked about this in the last draft highlights, but Keenan Allen is obviously a short-term solution. He's 32 years old, and even DJ Moore. I think DJ Moore is he's either 25 or 27. He's not a rookie, right?
He's in there.
Yeah. So ideally, when you're drafting a young quarterback like Caleb Williams, you'd also like to pair him with a receiver that we can keep for a very long time, which is something the Bears, since Alshon Jeffrey, that was the last time I feel like we've had a substantial receiver that we've drafted. So getting a guy like that would be very, very exciting. I think for me, the other most exciting option at the 9 would be going with one of the offensive tackles. I feel like the strength of the draft in the first round is mostly offense. I think people predict 20 out of, or 25 of the first 32 picks are going to be all offensive focused. So I think that first defensive player is going to happen maybe at the 10 or outside the top 10. So if we could get, I don't think Alt's going to be available, but if we could get someone like Olufoshanu at the 9 to protect Caleb Williams, I think those are the 2 scenarios that I'm going to be most excited about. Getting a stud offensive tackle or going, in the event of a trade up, going for a receiver. Yeah,
I think that in the ideal scenario, I think that the Cardinals are going to take Marvin Harrison.
I agree.
I think that it's, they've given indications that that's probably where they're going to go. But yeah, I think that if the Vikings do trade up, it's possible that Neighbors or Odunze could be there. And if they are, you take him.
Yeah.
I don't think it's any question. I think that if he's not there, I don't because here's the thing, the wide receiver class this year is the most stacked wide receiver class I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Where you can still get, I mean, I'm looking at the list of like reliable players who have played at big schools, who have definitely there aren't any sort of items that stick out that say this guy cannot be on a starting line in the first or second year. So obviously Neighbors or Dunce Harrison are going to be the top. Then you got Brian Thomas, Adonai Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, and Ricky Pearsall. And I've got more, but I highlighted those guys because I think they have the potential to be as good as those top three. And you can pick those guys up in the second round.
100%.
And so with that, if we don't have Odunze or Harrison or Neighbors on the board, I think you look to those three teams who are close enough where you aren't going to lose a whole lot of draft space, but they also have a second round pick.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing, obviously, because of Montez Sweat, we don't have a second round pick.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can get a decent enough trade from either the Saints or the Raiders or the Colts, then I think you go with whether you get with that trade, the 13th, 14th, or 15th pick, you get your edge.
Yeah.
All right. I think that even though there aren't a ton of great edge rushers in the draft, it's different from like with wide receiver, where I think you have a bunch of great wide receivers right now. Mm-hmm. I think that there are three great edge rushers right now. Mm-hmm. Those being, Leitu Latu, Dallas Turner, and Jared Verse. One of those three will likely be on the board by the 15th pick. Mm-hmm. So if you already got a second pick and you can pick that guy up, okay, now you have completed your defense, which even with just Montez Sweat last season, I think they were the number one defense in the NFL across like a bunch of metrics. Yes. And I think if they have this as the final piece, I think you got a top 5 defense
100%.
Going into next season. Yeah.
100%.
And then so what do you do with either the 44th, 45th, or 46th pick? Like I said, I think there's plenty of really great wide receivers out there. Adonai Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, and Troy Franklin are the ones that stick out to me. Mm-hmm. Both were in really hard conferences, and granted, they had. McConkey. I don't know who Georgia's quarterback is, but he, even though on his 40, I think it was
Carson Beck, baby.
When you saw him in sort of the trials where he was running and catching, mm-hmm. The guy was locked in. And then you look at his highlight reel, the guy's really, really showing up some impressive footage. Yeah. And then Adonai Mitchell and Troy Franklin. And then you also got Roman Wilson. Yeah. Granted, Roman, and his highlight reel is just impressive. Mm-hmm. Harbaugh does not like to throw the deep ball mm-hmm. In his offense as much as other teams. That's also why people might have skepticism about JJ McCarthy. Mm-hmm. But what tape you've got on him, I think he could also be worthy of taking him in the second pick if he's on the board.
Oh God, we watched so many. I feel like we watched this season so many
Roman Wilson.
Michigan games, hoping to see JJ McCarthy fail, and we just see we Wilson would always. He is so good. He's so
always
fast.
Got the ball.
So fast. I remember he had. I forgot what game it was. It was a big time game where I think Roman Wilson had a big time fumble, but then he had the game winning. I think he had the game winning touchdown shortly after. He's just a playmaker, and he's so fast. He has a butterfly tattoo on his elbow though that we don't like. We think that.
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, it's a very.
Pat's pretty dialed in on him. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like when you're frustrated with a guy, you'll see anything, and you're like, oh, of course. I don't know. I think that's
It's like a Love Island tattoo.
Yeah, it's a bro. I feel like a bro tattoo you'd see.
At least it's not Greek letters, man. If you see that on anybody, it's just
that's a draft board. Yeah, I think trading down. I think my opinion about Joe Alt is, I would say Joe Alt, I think, is a tier break between Olu, even though Olu and Caleb Williams, I'm pretty sure they were Gonzaga teammates together, or at least they're both Gonzaga guys, so they're high school teammates, which is kind of cool. But I think that Sully Swaga and then Olu are a tier break between Joe Alt. But even there, I still think that the difference in performance you'd get from Braxton Jones to switch to Joe Alt, I still think I would rather take the upgrade at edge, especially considering you would not be able to trade back and take Joe Alt within the teens. I feel like. I think Joe Alt will far and away be the first lineman. So I think at the 9, there are going to be teams who, if Joe Alt is still there, are going to be more interested in taking him. So I think at the 9, regardless, I think only if those 3 receivers are gone, I would be fine. I think the only case where we stay at the 9 would be if those 3 receivers are there. And I would be fine trading back. This yesterday was when I really started to actually look at the edge tape more than just the highlight reels. And I had not really noticed how freaking strong Jared Verse is. Like watching his tape against like Florida, where he can actually just like, not to compare him to Khalil Mack, but the way that he can just like bull rush somebody, I feel like is such, the strength component of his game is so strong and developed, which is a little different than like Latu, who's more of like a finesse guy, real bendy. He's good with like his cross chop, stuff like that. But Verse and Turner, I feel like would be super exciting players. And yeah, to hit on your point, Kevin, I think in the second round, I think that there's a lot of good talent there. Xavier, I feel like A.D. Mitchell and maybe Xavier Worthy, I feel like those guys might be more in the second round more than the third round. I agree with that. Xavier Laggett, the South Carolina guy who's like a DK Metcalf clone, like I feel like he'd be an interesting prospect as well. But yeah, I think Ricky Parcel too, his highlight tape from the Senior Bowl was like absolutely like dynamite. I feel like there's
that one-handed catch that he had. I mean, I that is
insane.
I mean, unfortunately, you can't find a ton of tape on YouTube about him because everyone just like showcases that catch, which looks like it's more impressive than OBJ catch when he was like first year out of LSU with York. That was so impressive. But no, he's lights out. Yeah. So
I think definitely if those guys are there, if those 3 is there, I would feel comfortable trading. If those 3 guys are not there, I'd feel comfortable addressing edge, being able to find talent within that round 2 or 3. I mean, A.D. Mitchell, I still feel like could be a wide receiver 1. Brian Thomas could be a 1 for sure. I feel like even outside the top 3, there's 4 or 5 people that I could be confident stepping in at least as a 1 or at least a 2 for an NFL team. So I feel like it would be good to take advantage of this wide receiver class and, kind of use our draft to get one of the 3 premium edge rushers. I think that would be the best way to spend this 9th or, way to exercise it.
No, I agree. And I agree with your take that I think Joe Alt's going to be off the board anyway. I think from what I've read, seems like Tennessee is definitely looking to lock him in. And, for good reason. I mean, the guy I think is like a generational
as a monster
offensive tackle. Yeah. He's a monster. And it's one of those few picks where it's just like you really don't have to worry about if he's ready on day 1. You can just slot him in, and it's more than likely that guy will have a long career and potentially be like a star for years to come. I think that Braxton Jones, he's shown good value given that we got him. What was it, the 5th pick?
5th,
or something. 5th pick. He's made improvements, and I think that we have to give him time because he is good. All right. Granted, there were parts in the beginning of the season where I wanted to throw my plate at the TV because I'm just like, how the hell did you screw that up? But then throughout the season, he definitely showed progress. It's frustrating because it's like the Bears have really never, at least in my memory, made a serious commitment to the O-line. We've had, years where there was 1 or 2 guys who were, who were great, but there was no continuity between the rest of the line. And so it was easy for, defenses to figure out where the weak spots are. So yeah, I think that just, the opportunity to add immediate value lies with the edge and the wide receiver. And look, They had who was it? Kieran Amagaje from Yale.
Mm.
They're on the top 30 list with the Bears,
Mhm.
so I mean they're considering it. Granted, you're probably best case going to get him in the third round if he's still available. I'm not sure if an Ivy League, nothing against the Ivy League, but I don't think I've ever seen an Ivy League football game on TV. So I guess
Yeah.
I don't know if it's on par with what you would see in like the Big Ten or the SEC,
Mhm.
but people keep talking about him is that he's a hidden gem that should be given more attention, and the only reason that he's not is because he's in the conference that he's in. So yeah, I mean, I think there will be some talent in the third round, but I don't think we waste. Sorry, not waste. I don't think we spend first or second round capital on an OT.
I think I agree.
Okay, interesting. I was not. So we have very different opinions. Okay, I was not expecting that. Okay, so you guys, even if the only player you would take there is if Joel was there, and we don't think that's. I mean, that's not going to happen. That's the only person you would be taking at the 9.
I don't think so because I mean I think that unless there is if this is last year's not sorry the year before last year's offensive line, I would be more amenable to considering Joe Alt. And even in the beginning of this season, there were some obvious flaws in the offensive line, but I've seen enough progress in the offensive line in the latter half of the year where I think that it's fine to keep improving on what we've got.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's any decent free agents out there that we can kind of add in. I mean, because we've already made some moves. We already made moves. I mean, granted, I don't think we technically have a dedicated center. Maybe we do. Yeah. The moves that Ryan Poles has made has been an acknowledgement that that the O line was above average, and this is meant to improve upon that. But I think that that's also an indication that it's like I'm not going to be prioritizing Joel with the 9th pick.
Gotcha.
Because I think they made 2 free agency signings, maybe it was 3, on the O line. I think when you're doing that in free agency, that's kind of an indicator that that's the moves I'm making on the O line.
Yeah. Ryan Poles, famously not great at signing linemen, I would say.
God, I feel like years past we made 100 free agency signings, but those are like at the absolute bargain bin.
He's always moneyballing his receiver or his line, and I feel like it always ends up being like you get stuck with. It's like every game, I feel like there's a stat why Lucas Patrick is the worst lineman, and then he's starting every game, and like somehow he's hurt, or like last year where our center was like when our Patrick went out and our center was like snapping it over Fields' head, or like first time that you noticed that, I didn't know that centers would still mess up the snaps. So I think depth is always a good thing. Yeah, so looking at the incoming players we have, so we have Jake Curran from the Seahawks, we have Ryan Bates who we traded for from the Bills, and the guy from the Rams, Coleman Shelton, who won a Super Bowl as a center. So I feel like he currently slots in as our center, but I agree. I think it's mostly been depth stuff at line. I feel like we haven't really been trying to address, wide sweeping things, and I think that's Poles saying that where we are with our line right now is fine entering this season, and kind of looking elsewhere for the draft.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I think to kind of sum up what we've discussed, or what the common consensus is. So we said first pick, lock, Caleb Williams. That number 9, unless it is a top 3 receiver, you guys would prefer to trade back.
JJ McCarthy.
You draft, JJ McCarthy. Trade back with a team within the, like we said, 13, 14, 15, to still try to grab one of those edge rushers to get that value. God, that'd be sick. Yeah, like you said, Kevin, to take care of that defense and just have it locked away, set, and then you can just see where it goes with the offense. Okay, and then can we real quick highlight what we wanted with the 3rd round again? I know if we said we traded back to get an edge instead of drafting a 9 receiver, we would have tried to address depth with receiver, right? Were there any other possibilities with that 3rd pick that we talked about?
Yeah, I think you can get. I mean, if there's one other area that you might want to improve outside of those, maybe there's defensive line,
Yeah.
like a Brandon Dorlus or something like that. That could definitely help. I know that we're kind of weak. I mean, I think we need more depth, maybe at safety. I mean, that's one of the that's right up there with kicker as far as the unsexiest type of positions you can draft for. But yeah, I mean, I think that we're pretty good there. But I mean, where you might want to add some depth is safety. Corner, I mean, despite the fact that what was it? The top 30, I think there's been 10 top 30 visits confirmed by the Bears, and there's 3 of them are cornerbacks.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. So you got Nehemiah Pritchett, you got Elijah Jones and Cam Hart out of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So just given where those guys are, I mean, that sounds third pick to me. Unless you guys disagree. I mean, I haven't been following closely ever since Jalen Johnson re-signed. We got Tyreek Stevenson. I don't think that there's a huge priority to keep stacking the cornerback slot, but they've already about a third of their visits that they've scheduled so far are with corners.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I think Poles just really values the cornerback position. I think he just really values the secondary, making Gordon, who he essentially drafted a nickel with our second round pick. His first draft as a Bears player, or a Bears GM, he drafted a nickel corner. And then Brisker, I feel like he honestly in the league, it's like you never have enough receivers. You really never have enough DBs, especially the way that it seems like in years past, Kindle Vildor would always slot in as a starter once season starts. So yeah, I think it's a good cornerback class. I think we could address that there. Again, I think Dexter came on strong towards the end of the year. Zach Pickens still looking a little shaky. So finding somebody for the 3 technique, especially with I guess Justin Jones leaving for the Cardinals, I think you could always look to add there, but I think corner is probably where that, it kind of looks like that third pick will go. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah. What do you guys think of running back, by the way? Do you think that?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I was seeing that a little more too.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that at 122, the 4th round, you're probably going to have Audric Estime. Also, I can't believe I'm promoting all these Notre Dame guys.
Yeah, the MD guy, yeah.
Purdue, yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's a great running back. Like wide receiver, I think that there's a lot of really good running backs. And they actually, another top 30 visit is Dylan Laub, who's out of New Hampshire, who I saw his tape. Guy looks amazing. I don't even know what conference the University of New Hampshire plays out of, but it's similar to what we talked about with Amagaje, where it's I think they're looking for value in that 3rd or 4th pick that might be overlooked just because of the conferences that they're in. And then, I mean, I think that if we're able to get more than a 2nd round pick out of some of these trades, we can get a 5th or 6th round pick. I think there's also some really interesting options out there. I mean, if we want even more depth at wide receiver, I think there's 2 great wide receivers out of UT San Antonio, who I can't think of their name right now, but I looked at their highlight reel. Yeah, I think that there's also some hidden gems up there at running back and wide receiver. So,
yeah, I think running back is a position where you always just draft. I think running back is always a safe position to take in the middle rounds. I think you just get, because of how devalued the position has become, I feel like you get kind of like safety too, just how devalued it is now. I feel like you can get really quality players. Pretty sure Daniel Jeremiah doesn't have any safeties in his top the 30 or 40 players. Same with running back. It's just tough to get him in there. So I feel like just filling them in around really fills out a roster, just drafting nice running backs. And I think I wouldn't mind taking a running back there.
Yeah, totally.
God, yeah, it never hurts. Yeah. All right, guys. So I think that just about does it for our NFL draft overview. And I think with that, that'll wrap up the episode. Yeah. Kevin, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak to us. Really appreciate your thoroughness, your research, your, like Connor mentioned, your expertise as someone that's not a 21-year-old is definitely more valued than what Connor and I know. He's certainly knowledgeable in a lot of.
Give yourself more credit, guys. Right? I've listened to the podcast since it kicked off, and you guys give much better analysis than the Mel Kipers of the world. So, but that's a low bar. So, but no, you guys, I love what you're doing here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Love to come on again anytime.
Hey, anytime.
Yeah, Connor, any closing remarks?
No, I think this is a great episode. Love diving into it. Hour 20 listeners of the pod to get a nice beefy podcast that they can listen to here. But I think that's all I gotta say. Bear down, baby.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So that'll do it for another episode of the Chicagolandians. Tune in next week to hear another episode. As always, bear down, baby. Woo!
Bear down.